John sat in the dimly lit courtroom, his eyes fixed on the young boy beside him. His son, Jack, looked up at him with wide, questioning eyes, unaware of the storm brewing around them. The air was thick with tension as the judge's gavel came down, signaling the start of the divorce hearing. As the proceedings began, John's mind wandered back to the countless memories they'd shared. The early morning wake-up calls for breakfast, the bedtime stories, the countless sports games, and the everyday conversations about life. John had been Jack's rock, his guiding light, and his safe haven. He'd given up his own dreams, his own desires, for the sake of his son's happiness. Their daily interactions were a testament to their unbreakable bond. John remembered the time Jack had learned to ride a bike, his tears of frustration giving way to joy as he pedaled away, John cheering him on from the sidelines. There were the countless school plays, the sports trophies, and the family vacations, all of which had been made possible by John's unwavering presence. As the hearing continued, John's thoughts turned to the countless sacrifices he'd made for Jack, the late nights, the early mornings, the endless juggling of work and family life. He'd given up his own aspirations, his own identity, for the sake of being a good father. And yet, in doing so, he'd discovered a sense of purpose he'd never known before. The courtroom fell silent as the judge asked John to take the stand. He stood before them, his heart pounding in his chest, as the attorney began to question him. "Mr. John, can you tell us about your relationship with Jack?" The words tumbled out of him, a heartfelt and sincere account of their daily interactions, their milestones, and their memories. But as the questioning continued, inconsistencies began to emerge. The mother's attorney pressed on, highlighting discrepancies in John's story. Jack's eyes grew wider, his face etched with confusion and fear. John's heart sank, his mind racing with the implications. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension. John's emotions seesawed as he struggled to maintain his composure. The stakes were high, the outcome uncertain, and yet, as he looked at Jack, he knew that he'd do anything to protect him, to provide for him, to be there for him. The DNA test results were a bombshell, shattering the very foundation of John's world. The truth was revealed, and with it, a tidal wave of emotions crashed down on him. Shock, denial, anger, grief, and confusion swirled together in a maelstrom of pain. Jack's eyes locked onto his, a mixture of fear and uncertainty etched on his face. As the courtroom erupted into chaos, John's world began to crumble. He felt like he was losing his son, his identity, and his purpose, all at once. The mother's words cut deep, her guilt and regret, a small comfort in the face of John's devastation. The judge's voice cut through the din, a reminder of the harsh realities of American family court law. Biology trumped emotion, and John's love and presence in Jack's life were suddenly deemed irrelevant. The system prioritized DNA over devotion, a cruel irony that left John reeling. As the hearing drew to a close, John's eyes remained fixed on Jack. The boy's face was a mask of confusion and sadness, his eyes red-rimmed from tears. John's heart ached for him, for the pain and uncertainty that lay ahead. And yet, even in the midst of this chaos, John knew that his love for Jack remained unwavering. As they left the courtroom, John's thoughts turned to the future. Would he be granted custody of Jack? Would he be able to provide for his son's needs? The uncertainty was suffocating, but one thing was clear. John would fight for his son, for the love they shared, and for the bond that had been forged in the fire of their relationship. The question hung in the air like a challenge. What does it mean to be a father? Is it defined by DNA or by love, presence, and sacrifice? As John looked at Jack, he knew that the answer lay in the depths of their unbreakable bond, a bond that would endure long after the courts had spoken. As the courtroom fell silent, John's eyes remained fixed on his son, Jack. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words, the weight of which hung precariously in the balance. To anyone observing, it seemed like the perfect family, the loving father, the devoted mother, and the happy, carefree son. But beneath the surface, a different story unfolded. John's marriage to Sarah had been a whirlwind romance, filled with laughter, excitement, and a deep-seated connection. They had met in college, bonding over late-night conversations and shared dreams. As they graduated, they decided to start a family, and Jack was born. The early years were a blur of diapers, sleepless nights, and endless smiles. John was besotted with his son, and his love for Sarah only grew stronger as they navigated the ups and downs of parenthood together. However, as the years passed, the cracks began to show. Sarah's once vibrant personality slowly gave way to a distant, detached demeanor. She became increasingly preoccupied with her own ambitions, leaving John to bear the brunt of childcare responsibilities. The once united front they presented to the world began to fracture, with John struggling to keep their relationship afloat amidst the chaos. Despite the challenges, John remained committed to his family, sacrificing his own desires to ensure Jack's needs were met. He became the rock upon which their fragile household stood, and Jack grew to rely on his father's unwavering presence. As Sarah's emotional detachment deepened, John found himself filling the void left by her absence. He became Jack's primary caregiver, educator, and confidant, pouring all his love and energy into their son's life. But beneath the surface, a complex web of emotions had taken hold. Sarah's increasing distance from their son had created a void that John had desperately tried to fill. He had become Jack's rock, his safe haven, and his guiding light. As the years went by, John's love for his son had grown exponentially, and he had come to realize that he was more than just a father. He was Jack's everything. The courtroom, once a place of uncertainty, had become a battleground. The tension between John and Sarah had reached a boiling point, with the judge's gavel hanging precariously in the balance. The air was thick with unspoken words, the weight of which hung precariously in the balance. As the attorney's questions cut through the silence, the truth began to unravel, threatening to upend the very fabric of John's world. The DNA test results, once a mere formality, now loomed large in the shadows. John's mind reeled as the truth began to sink in, a truth that would shatter the very foundations of his existence. The courtroom, once a place of certainty, had become a maelstrom of uncertainty, leaving John to navigate the treacherous waters of his own identity. As the truth began to reveal itself, John's world crumbled around him. The love he had given so freely, the sacrifices he had made, and the unwavering commitment he had shown to his son, all of it hung precariously in the balance. The question that had haunted him for so long, am I truly Jack's father, now loomed large, threatening to upend the very fabric of his existence. In the midst of the chaos, Jack remained a constant presence, his wide-eyed innocence a stark contrast to the turmoil that swirled around him. He looked up at his father with a mixture of confusion and fear, unsure of what lay ahead. As John's world began to unravel, Jack's eyes locked onto his father's, a silent plea for reassurance and guidance. The courtroom, once a place of uncertainty, had become a battleground. The tension between John and Sarah had reached a boiling point, with the judge's gavel hanging precariously in the balance. As the truth began to unravel, the very fabric of John's existence was torn asunder, leaving him to confront the darkest corners of his own heart. In the end, it was not the DNA test results that would define John's relationship with his son. It was not the law that would determine his worth as a father. It was the love he had given, the sacrifices he had made, and the unwavering commitment he had shown to Jack. As the courtroom fell silent, John's eyes locked onto his son's, a bittersweet realization dawning on him. He may not be Jack's biological father, but he was his everything. The question that had haunted him for so long, "Am I truly Jack's father?" now hung precariously in the balance. A reminder that fatherhood is not defined by DNA, but by the love, presence, and sacrifice that flows from the heart. As the courtroom's gavel fell, John's world was forever changed, leaving him to ponder the true meaning of fatherhood in a world that seemed to value biology over emotion. John's world was turned upside down as the courtroom erupted in a flurry of emotions. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the moment hanging precariously in the balance. Sarah, his wife of over a decade, stood before him, her eyes locked on the judge as she whispered a single phrase. "I am filing for divorce, John." The room seemed to freeze, the sound of the gavel crashing down against the wooden desk, the only sound breaking the silence. John's eyes darted to their son, Jack, who sat beside him, his wide eyes filled with a mix of confusion and fear. He was just a child, unaware of the storm brewing around them, of the secrets and lies that had been hidden for so long. As the courtroom erupted into chaos, the attorneys began to question Sarah, their voices rising and falling in a staccato rhythm. John's mind reeled as he listened to the words, his heart racing with a mix of emotions. He thought back to the memories they had made together, the late-night feeds, the first steps, the first words. He remembered the countless sacrifices he had made for their family, the countless nights he had stayed up, worrying about their future. But as the questioning continued, John began to notice inconsistencies in Sarah's story. She seemed nervous, fidgety, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. And then it hit him. A question from the attorney, a simple phrase that sent a chill down his spine. "Can you prove that John is the biological father of your child?" Sarah's eyes locked on the judge, her voice barely above a whisper. We did a paternity test, and the results show that John is not the biological father of our child." The room seemed to spin, John's world crashing down around him. But he felt like he had been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of him. He looked at Jack, his son, the child he had raised from birth, and a wave of emotions washed over him. Shock, denial, anger, grief, and confusion swirled together in a toxic mix, threatening to consume him whole. As the courtroom erupted into chaos, John's mind reeled with questions. What did this mean? Wasn't he a father to Jack? Didn't he count? He thought back to all the memories they had made together, the laughter, the tears, the late-night feedings. He remembered the countless sacrifices he had made for their family, the countless nights he had stayed up worrying about their future. And in that moment, John realized that being a father wasn't just about biology. It was about love, presence, and sacrifice. It was about being there for your child, no matter what. And in that moment, John knew that he was still a father to Jack, no matter what the DNA test said.
As the courtroom continued to erupt into chaos, John's eyes locked on Jack, his son. He knew that he would do whatever it took to be there for him, to be a father to him, no matter what the law said. He knew that he would fight for him, for their future, for the love they shared. And as the judge's gavel came down, signaling the start of a new chapter in their lives, John knew that he would emerge from this storm stronger, more resilient than ever. He would be a father to Jack, no matter what, and he would make sure that their love continued to grow, to flourish, even in the face of adversity. But as the courtroom erupted into chaos, one question lingered in John's mind. What about the child? What about Jack? How would he handle this news? Would he understand? Would he be okay? John's eyes locked on Jack, his son, and he knew that he would do whatever it took to protect him, to keep him safe. He would be a father to him, no matter what, and he would make sure that their love continued to grow, to flourish, even in the face of adversity. As Sarah stood before the judge, her eyes locked on the papers in front of her, her mind was racing with every imaginable emotion. Guilt, fear, regret. They swirled together in a maelstrom that threatened to consume her. She thought back to the day she had met John, the day they had fallen deeply in love, the day they had decided to start a family together. They had been young, carefree, and full of hope for the future. But life had other plans. Sarah's eyes drifted to John, who sat across from her, his face a mask of confusion and pain. She knew that look, that feeling of being lost and alone. She had seen it in the mirror every day since she had discovered the truth about Jack's paternity. It was a truth she had kept from John, a secret she had carried with her for years, a burden that had grown heavier with each passing day. But why had she kept it from him? Why had she denied him the right to know the truth about his own son? The answers to those questions were complicated, tangled in a web of emotions and motivations that Sarah struggled to unravel even now. She had been young, scared, and unsure of what the future held. She had been afraid of losing John, of losing the life they had built together. And so she had kept the truth hidden away like a secret in a dark corner of her heart. But the truth had a way of revealing itself, of bursting forth like a dam breaking, leaving destruction in its wake. And now, here they were, in the midst of a divorce court, with the very fabric of their family torn apart. Sarah's heart ached as she thought of Jack, her beautiful, innocent son, caught in the crossfire of their broken marriage. She knew that he loved John, that he looked up to him as a father figure, and that thought filled her with a deep sense of regret. As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, Sarah's mind flashed back to the day she had discovered Jack's true paternity. It had been a day like any other, a day filled with the mundane routines of motherhood. But as she had looked at Jack, her heart had skipped a beat, her mind racing with the impossible. She had known, deep down, that something was wrong, that Jack's eyes, his smile, his laugh, they didn't belong to her. And then the DNA test had confirmed it, leaving her with a choice to leave it to Joan to keep the truth hidden, or to reveal the truth and risk losing him forever. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of paper shuffling, the rustle of clothing, and the soft murmur of the judge's voice. She snapped back to reality, her eyes locking onto John's, her heart heavy with the weight of her secrets. She knew that she had to tell him, to reveal the truth about Jack's paternity. But how? And when? The question swirled in her mind like a maelstrom threatening to consume her.
As the courtroom fell silent once more, Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving John's face. She knew that she had to be honest, that she had to reveal the truth about Jack's paternity, no matter how difficult it might be. But she also knew that the consequences of her actions would be far-reaching, that they would change the course of their lives forever. And so, with a sense of trepidation, she began to speak, her words tumbling out like a confession. "John, I have something to tell you, something that will change everything. The courtroom battle between John and Sarah was a spectacle that would be etched in the memories of everyone present for years to come. The tension was palpable as the two attorneys stood before the judge, their voices raised in a heated exchange of questions and answers. The air was thick with the weight of their arguments, each side determined to prove their point. John's eyes were fixed intently on the judge, his face a mask of calm determination, while Sarah's gaze darted anxiously between her attorney and the judge. As the questioning continued, the tone of the courtroom shifted from tense to explosive. The lawyer's words hung in the air like a challenge, each side waiting for the other to slip up. The judge listened attentively, her expression unreadable. The courtroom was a powder keg, ready to ignite at any moment. Meanwhile, the son sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, his eyes fixed on his father's face. He looked confused and scared, unsure of what was happening. He had always known his father to be a constant presence in his life, a source of love and support. Now, he was being forced to confront the possibility that this man, who had raised him, who had taught him, who had been his rock, might not be his biological father. The tension reached a boiling point as the judge called for a recess. The courtroom erupted into chaos as the lawyers and their clients spilled out into the hallway, each side arguing their point. John and Sarah stood facing each other, their faces etched with emotion. The son looked on, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. As the recess continued, the judge met with the lawyers in her chambers. She listened attentively as they presented their arguments, her expression unreadable. Finally, she emerged, a somber look on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and authoritative. "The results of the DNA test are in, and I'm afraid they reveal a shocking truth." The courtroom fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. John's eyes locked onto the judge, his face pale with fear. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, her face pale and drawn. "The DNA test confirms that John is not the biological father of their son," the judge announced, her voice firm but gentle. The courtroom erupted into chaos, the sound of gasps and sobs filling the air. John's face contorted in shock and denial, while Sarah's eyes filled with tears. The son looked on, his face a mask of confusion and fear. As the reality of the situation sunk in, John's world began to crumble. He felt like he was living in a nightmare, unable to wake up. He thought back to all the times he had held his son, all the memories they had made together. Had it all been a lie? Had he been living a false identity? The judge's words hung in the air, a challenge to the very fabric of John's identity. He felt like he was losing his sense of self, like he was no longer the man he thought he was. The courtroom was a blur, the sounds and faces around him a distant memory. All he could focus on was the truth, the harsh reality that was threatening to destroy everything he held dear. As the courtroom chaos died down, the judge's voice cut through the silence. "Let's proceed with the next step," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "The question of custody and responsibility must be addressed." The lawyers began to argue their points, the courtroom erupting into chaos once again. But John's mind was elsewhere, consumed by the shock and denial that threatened to overwhelm him. He felt like he was losing his grip on reality, like he was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. The son, meanwhile, sat quietly in the back of the courtroom, his eyes fixed on his father's face. He looked scared and confused, unsure of what was happening. But as he looked into his father's eyes, he knew one thing for sure. No matter what the judge said, no matter what the DNA test revealed, his father would always be his father in every way that mattered. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the tension in the air was palpable. The judge, a stern figure with a kind face, listened intently to the attorney's arguments. But amidst the legal jargon and technicalities, a harsh reality hung over John and Sarah like a spectre. The law, as unforgiving as it was, would ultimately decide what was best for their son. In America's family court system, paternity, custody, and responsibility are governed by a complex web of laws and regulations. The priority, above all else, is biology. The father's name on the birth certificate, a DNA test, or a court-ordered genetic analysis can all serve as proof of paternity. But what about the countless hours, the sleepless nights, and the unconditional love John had showered on his son since birth? Did these mean anything in the eyes of the law? As John sat in the courtroom, his eyes fixed on the judge, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Despite his love and presence in his son's life, he may not have the same legal rights as the biological father. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. How could something as fundamental as fatherhood be reduced to a simple DNA test? The law, it seemed, cared little for the emotional bonds that tied a father to his child. The truth, as harsh as it was that the law can be cruel. It can leave emotional wounds that take years to heal, wounds that cut deep into the very fabric of a family. John's relationship with his son, once so strong and unshakable, now hung precariously in the balance. The uncertainty was suffocating, a weight that pressed down on him with every passing moment. As the judge deliberated, the silence in the courtroom was oppressive. The mother, Sarah, sat with her eyes cast down, her face etched with a mixture of guilt and fear. She knew the law, and she knew its harsh realities. But did she truly understand the impact it would have on her child, on John, and on their family as a whole? The outcome of the court case would be a turning point in their lives, a moment that would forever change the dynamics of their family. But as the judge's decision loomed large, one thing was certain. The law, though unforgiving, would ultimately define what it meant to be a father, not just in the eyes of the court, but in the eyes of the child. As the courtroom drama drew to a close, John's world was turned upside down. The bittersweet conclusion of the case left him reeling, forced to adapt to a new reality without his biological father. The weight of this reality was crushing as he struggled to come to terms with the fact that his son, who had grown to love him as a father, was now facing a new chapter in his life without him. John's emotions were a jumble of sadness, anger, and confusion. He thought back to the countless memories they had shared, the late-night feedings, the early morning wake-ups, the bedtime stories, and the countless sacrifices he had made for his son. He remembered the look of pride on his son's face when he took his first steps, the first day of school, and the countless birthdays and holidays they had celebrated together. But now, all of that was being taken away from him, thanks to a DNA test that had revealed a shocking truth. Sarah, on the other hand, was a complex and flawed human being, struggling to come to terms with the guilt and fear that had driven her to keep the truth from John. She had always known that the DNA test results would change everything, but she had hoped that John would be able to find it in his heart to forgive her. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, Sarah realized that forgiveness was not going to be easy. As for their son, he was caught in the middle, struggling to make sense of the emotions that were swirling around him. He loved his father, but he also loved his mother, and he didn't understand why they couldn't be together anymore. He was confused, scared, and emotionally attached to the father figure who had raised him from birth. The American family court law regarding paternity, custody, and responsibility was clear. Biology took precedence over emotions. But as John and Sarah navigated this new reality, they couldn't help but wonder if this was truly the right way. Was fatherhood defined by DNA, or was it something more? Was it the love, presence, and sacrifice that John had given to his son, or was it the biological connection that had been revealed in the DNA test results? As the dust settled, John was left to ponder these questions. He thought about the countless hours he had spent with his son, the countless sacrifices he had made for him, and the countless memories they had shared. And he realized that, in the end, it wasn't about the DNA test results or the court's decision. It was about the love, presence, and sacrifice that he had given to his son, and the love that his son had given to him.